like this video, hit subscribe, hit the little bell icon, and help a sister out, please, please. Back to my channel. I'm Dina Haynes, and I am reading my book Neesa to you free on YouTube. That's where you're at. The book is a contemporary romance, and it is the first reality book series that I've ever heard of, which is why I called it the original. If you haven't watched chapters 1 through 11, now's the time to go back and watch those chapters because, of course, this is spoiler time. Things are starting to heat up in Neesa's life. She was doing a showing in the wonderful Hollywood Hills. She meets a mysterious guy at the showing. He's very single. And Neesa has this debt hanging over her head with Annabelle, that promise that she made to Annabelle that she would go out on a date. And here comes this guy, David, and he seems harmless, and she's thinking, hey, you know, maybe I can fulfill this debt. I can go out with this guy and maybe even sell a house in the process. I don't think she's really interested in this guy. I really just think she's trying to put her training wheels on it and get this first date over with. And then enters Ben, and of course he screws everything up, and Neesa really makes it clear to him that she just doesn't want to see him. According to her, he's just not long-term dating material. The most interesting part, I think, was that toward the end of this chapter, Neesa admits, not to Ben, but at least to herself, that the chemistry between her and Ben is so strong that she might be considering just sleeping with him. And you're going to find out why that is in chapter 12. Chapter 12, Reuben's perspective. Reuben hadn't gone far, only to the bushes around the edge of the driveway, where he thought he might retch. This day couldn't get any worse. He had information Denise needed. Up until now, he couldn't risk losing her for good by confessing his secret, but a date with Jeff Schaefer sealed the fate. His stomach turned again. Everything about this situation screamed wrong, screamed setup, and the fact that he was enmeshed in it with Schaefer didn't bode well. He'd made the pledge to protect and serve another lifetime ago, but those 3 words stuck to his core beliefs. After all the grief he supposed he'd put her through, she deserved a better warning. She deserved for him to put his self-interest aside and make her well-being a priority. It would be a first for him. He heard Jeff's wimpy voice saying goodbye from near the front door and ducked behind a large SUV. The arrogant bastard's chest was puffed up as he crossed the street and approached his navy Audi. Reuben moved swiftly behind him. He heard the loud beep of the door-locking mechanism right before he grabbed Jeff's shoulder and spun him around. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He relished the way the guy's eyes widened in terror a second before he mastered his reaction. Schaefer said, "I could ask you the same thing. That conversation you two had looked intimate." He scowled as if the image of Reuben and Denise together both baffled and disgusted him. Reuben twisted Jeff's collar and shoved him against the door of his car. "You're a married man, married to her friend. What are you playing at here?" Jeff tensed his narrow shoulders in an aw shucks gesture, and Reuben fought the urge to choke him. Jeff said, "She asked me out. You were there." Reuben growled, "You lied to her." Jeff was so calm that Reuben almost wished the man would get mad, as he had upstairs a few minutes ago. Then he'd have an excuse to deck him. Jeff said, "Yeah, well, there's nothing you can do about it." His voice shook under the strain of masked fear. "Unless you want to tell her you've been investigating her for the past couple of months. And since when do investigators get involved with the people they're spying on? Doesn't that qualify as a conflict of interest? You're lucky I don't report you for breach of conduct." Reuben pushed him against the car again, released his shirt, and stared in awe. Unbelievable. It was about her all along, wasn't it? That's why you didn't act surprised when I gave you the results. Jeff said, "A lot of good it did when you never gave me the info I paid for." His temper finally peeked through on those last words. He tugged at his collar and sleeves, straightening out the wrinkles like some smug asshole. Jeff continued, "It all turned out fine in the end, though, no thanks to you. On second thought, maybe I can give you some credit. I'm sure you figured you were charming in an alpha hero kind of way, demanding she go out with you." Jeff pretended to hold in his laughter. "You were so pathetic. I almost felt sorry for you. Fortunately for me, she has taste. I'm going to take her out for a nice dinner, and she's going to have a great time. Too bad you won't be there to see it." Reuben said, "Oh, I'll be there. You can count on it." Jeff said, inching closer to meet Reuben eye to eye, "I wouldn't do that if I were you. I can spend the whole night making up a story and comparing notes with her about what a creep you are. From your little argument upstairs, seems she had a story to tell herself. And when it's all said and done, we can call the police together to prove you've been stalking her. Incidentally, where do you keep those pictures you took? You know, professional standards are tricky to uphold if you've spent more time cracking skulls than books. I'm sure a court-appointed lawyer could explain them to you if Denise decides to press charges. Or you could stay away from her, locked into secrecy with me." He shrugged. "Up to you." The bastard's true colors finally showed. Reuben wished he had seen it coming. Maybe he could have protected Denise instead of trying so hard to date her. But protect her from what? The guy wanted to date his wife's friend. It wasn't a crime, but Reuben knew how she'd feel when she found out. He wondered why Denise hadn't recognized Jeff right off the bat, as close as she was to Annabelle. Surely she kept the wedding picture on her phone, though from his research he hadn't been able to find a single picture of Jeff and Annabelle together online. He was masterminding some scheme, and Reuben couldn't let Denise fall prey to it, even if it meant coming clean to her. Reuben said, "Watch your step, Jeff. Do anything to hurt her, and it won't matter what happens to me. I'll make sure you regret it." Jeff said, "Ooh, I'm scared. I'd like to get in my car now." Reuben backed away and watched Jeff climb behind the wheel and drive off. How did that jerk get the jump on him with Denise? Reuben had walked into a trap of his own making the moment he'd stepped up to Denise at Q's. If he were a reasonable man, he'd confess his involvement in her life and risk losing his license. It might not come to that. Might was a scary word, holding his whole career, his whole future as he knew it in the balance. He wasn't a stalker, but now he knew he'd been the instrument of one. It felt wrong to turn his back and walk away. As he stood outside the house, the sky turned beautiful shades of purple in the sunset. A date with the weasel wouldn't kill her, but he had to warn her somehow. He couldn't imagine their date would go any further than one outing. But why leave it to chance when Jeff had made it clear he intended to deceive her to get his way? He had to make her see reason. He might not be able to stop Denise from going out with the guy, but maybe he could rub the shine off of his fabricated demeanor. Surely Jeff would do the rest of the heavy lifting all on his own. A few more potential buyers stopped by the house while Reuben bided his time. When the last stragglers walked out, he glanced at the hour on his phone. The showing was over, so he approached the house one more time, praying Denise would hear him out. He found her upstairs in the master bedroom, locking the double doors to the backyard. When she turned around, she shouted, "Oh my God, you're still here?" Her voice shook from the adrenaline, and she bristled on an exaggerated sigh. "Why am I surprised?" Reuben said, "Someone's got to look out for your best interests." Denise said, "And dating you is in my best interest?" He'd already lost. What did he have to lose? Ordinarily, no, it wouldn't be. She moved past him toward the staircase and paused to give him a tormented look. She flicked off the light switch and descended the stairs, clinging to the railing. Now that they were alone, the picture she made in spiked heels and an apron almost hijacked his reason for being here. Committing character suicide. "Truth is," he continued, following her down the stairs, "I'm an asshole on a good day. I only date women if they're down for a mutually beneficial fuck, and when it stops being fun, I'm on to the next." She hit the bottom floor and wheeled around on him. "Wow, I'm confused. Now you don't think I should date you?" Reuben said, "I know how it sounds, but I had no intention of treating you that way." There was no mistaking the disbelief in her glare. "Think about it. Would I be saying this stuff if it weren't true?" Denise said, "Had no intention? Does that mean you've finally given up?" His chest hurt from the weight of his emotions. Reuben said, "Look, I know how you feel about me. I heard you say no the first time, and the second, and the third, and I mean, I may be a slow study, but I'm not completely brainless." She cocked a hip, but she was still listening. Reuben continued, "This time, this last time, I'm not here for me." Her expression turned dubious, and he couldn't blame her. He only prayed she would listen. Reuben continued, "That guy you agreed to go on a date with is dangerous." She snickered. "I'm serious." She said, "You mean the button-up who spent 30 minutes telling me he's looking for a wife to start a family with, but then didn't have the balls to ask me out?" "Right. He's the poster child for dangerous." She turned on her heel and continued toward the kitchen where the cookie sheets soaked in the sink. He followed her, and when he leaned against the island, the funniest sensation came over him. They were surrounded by this beautiful house, someone's dream house, though maybe not his, and for the first time he was picturing a woman as more than just bedroom material. While standing next to Denise, the mythical illusion of domestic bliss grew legs and arms and a beating heart. The concept forced his mind to expand, to grow, and perhaps over time to mature. This was the stuff that defined the boys from the men. He recognized that the urges he'd been having, wanting to make room for another human being in his life, were a calling. He didn't even know her yet, which confused him but gave him hope. In the same moment, the vision shattered. As Denise hunched over the sink, he saw a woman who would never need him. When she chose a man to settle down with, it would be because she loved the guy, not for what he could do for her, but because she wanted him, and what a lucky guy he would be. It wouldn't be Reuben, though. Denise unlocked the desire in him to have a love so pure it would complete him in a way he thought only existed in Lifetime movies of the week. For once, for her, he wished to rise to the challenge. He grabbed the towel lying on the counter and held out his hand for the dripping sheet pan in her hand. She frowned. "You look sad." He hadn't noticed, but his inner feelings had exposed him. "What?" "No, I don't want to see you get hurt." She placed the pan in his hand, and it felt like a peace offering. "Tell me, what makes David so dangerous? And how do you know?" He hesitated. He was still unsure how far he wanted to go with the truth. "I'm a private investigator." She jerked back with wild eyes. "Wow. That's the last thing I expected you to say. Are you for real?" He put up a hand. "I swear it's the truth." He dug his wallet out of his back pocket and showed her his PI license. When she handed him a spatula next, they locked eyes. What sparked between them was surprisingly intimate. She asked, "You're investigating him? Why?" She provided his out. He didn't want to lie to her, but maybe he could go along with her version of the truth for a while. "I shouldn't be telling you anything about the case, but She shifted her weight, her hands going still under the sudsy water. "You what?" They shared a moment, and then he caught her eyes slipping down to his mouth. Uneasy all of a sudden, Reuben laughed and licked his lips, which felt dry and cumbersome under her attention. He said, "I like you. A lot." The tension in his face dropped. He couldn't control his expression anymore because all he could think about was kissing her. She leaned toward him, raising her eyes to his, and said, "Not like the other girls, though, right?" Her tone carried an edge of sarcasm, and he found it sexy as hell. He let out a rush of air that was halfway between a laugh and self-contempt. He'd meant to do her a favor by coming in here, telling her about a potential hazard. Instead, he fought old habits, like leading with his libido. He put the spatula down and turned his body to hers. Her lips were so close that if he closed his eyes, he could feel them, taste them. He said, "Yeah, that's right." She said, "What do you like about me, huh?" The air that passed through her lips brushed a warm kiss over his mouth. His penis pressed against the fly of his jeans, and he blinked, hoping to contribute a well-thought-out response. He said, "I like your brain?" A soft chuckle bubbled up her throat. "My brain? You think it's sexy?" Her voice purred, drawing out a growl from him. He said, "Hell yes." She laughed in earnest, her smile making his heart drop to his stomach. He couldn't let this opportunity pass. He dipped his head and brushed his lips over hers. They were soft and warm. She froze for the longest couple of seconds, during which he sank into the deepest pit of desperation, worried she wouldn't kiss him back. Then her lips parted. She tasted spicy and sweet, like a cinnamon bun. His instinct was to devour her, but instead he held himself back. The softness of her lips made it an almost impossible task. He chanced to peek and saw her eyes were closed. It was the permission he'd been waiting for. He unleashed a fraction of his desire on her, swirling his tongue over hers in a sensuous dance. Control was paramount to proving his honorable intentions, lest he scare her away. Before he knew what his hands were doing, they brushed over the tiny hairs covering her skull. Pressing her back against the sink, he held her head steady as he prolonged the moment, knowing he may never experience it again. Her wet hands grasped his hips. She pulled him forward and he read her mind, curving his erection into the place where they both wished to connect. His brain scattered, the desire to get warm and cozy in the deepest part of her body making his heart race. But just because he wanted it didn't mean she was on board. He stopped before he lost control. They stood there, panting for a few moments as he nudged his cheek over hers. How he wished for her to make the first move and undo his zipper so that they might lie together. He knew it was the wrong place and the wrong time, but a man could hope. When he pulled back, she shied away from his gaze. He said, "Tell me what's going on in that head of yours." She said in the smallest voice, You scare me." If she was scared, he was terrified. He said, "I'll admit this is a first for me. I want to do right by you." His declaration was more significant than she could know. He said, and please don't take this the wrong way, if you only want to work out this tension between us, I'd be open to that." Her head jerked up, and he was certain he'd blown it. She said, "You mean like sex? Now? Have sex now?" Her switch to a harsher tone set the mood in the opposite direction. He said, "Oh my God, it sounds terrible when you say it." She said, "That right there, that's what I'm scared of. All you want is sex. You're not serious at all." He noticed the erection was still pressed into her crotch, slowly petering out by the second. He peeled his body away from hers and put his hands up in an ingratiating manner, backpedaling. "No, I'll take sex completely off the table if that's what you want." It was a surprise to him as soon as the words left his mouth. He continued, "Look, let me be clear. I want a chance with you, that's all. If there still is one. What I mean is, if there's a slim chance you do like me or want to see if you like me, I'd love to take you out on a real date." Geez, I promised myself I wasn't going to ask you out again. She stared at him so long that the energy between them quickly turned awkward. He said, "Oh my God, I'm fucking this up so bad. If you don't respond, I'm going to keep talking and it's only going to get worse." Her body pitched forward and he realized she was laughing. She said, "Oh my God, you're a mess with this whole talking to girls thing." He said, "I'm not, I swear, but then I see your beautiful face. It's like looking into the sun. And whatever's going on upstairs," he pointed to his head, "just goes haywire and craziness comes out." She laughed even harder, which meant he could laugh now, much to his relief. She said, "I can't believe I'm going to say this." She wiped a tear away from the corner of her eye and sighed before looking up. "Okay." He said, "Wait, like," he pointed to her chest and then his, "you and me in the same room, at the same table, eating a meal?" She said, "One, date," she admonished. "And don't get excited because this is more like an experiment. I guess I'm curious about you too." She covered her face with a hand and shook her head. "I can't believe I made 2 dates in one night." He said, "You could go out with me first and cancel your date with the other guy. That was the deal you made with Annabelle, right? I'm free right now, if you're free," he said. She said, "Right now?" She made a face as though ready to reject the idea. He stepped back to give her some more space and control of the situation. Reuben said, "If you have other plans, I get it, but I know a place down on Sunset that has the best Vietnamese noodles. Do you like pho?" She said, "Pho? That's soup, right?" He nodded. She chewed her lip for a second. "I am hungry, and it would keep me from eating the rest of these cookies I made." He said, "I love cookies. I'll eat the cookies. Where are they?" He spun around and found them in a Ziploc bag on the counter. Then he held up the bag and grabbed a couple and shoved them in his mouth. He moaned at the taste and spoke with his mouth full. "Just call me the Cookie Monster." She smiled with hesitation. Okay, okay, we're doing this. Let me finish closing things up around here and I'll meet you outside." He started backing up out of the kitchen. "Whatever you say. See, I'm taking the bag with me." She laughed, humoring him. Then all at once her expression changed. "Watch out for that." Something solid hit the back of his leg and he spun around a credenza in the foyer, regaining his balance and avoiding a fall. He held his hands up. "I got it. I'll be..." He motioned backward. "Outside." That concludes chapter 12. Thanks for listening, and I would really appreciate it if you could like the video, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the little bell icon so you'll be notified when the next chapter goes up. Hopefully you can't wait to get to chapter 13 because it's going to be from Neesa's perspective, and we're going to see what happens on this date.